What's going on, my friend? It's Jeff Newport from ChasingStrength.com. And in today's video, we are covering the three H's, right? What are the three H's? Well, they are today's kettlebell technique tips. Before we get into it, let me ask you a question. Do you ever wonder who the most powerful athletes are on the planet, or the most powerful strength athletes? Now, I think it's safe to say that a lot of people, maybe not all, and maybe not you, think it's powerlifters, those who compete to perform a one repetition maximum in the squat, bench, and deadlift. And while there's no doubt that many of these men and women are incredibly strong for their sport, powerlifting is incorrectly named. In fact, it should be called forcelifting or strengthlifting. Why? Well, simple. Their lifts, or the squat, bench, and deadlift, are performed slowly. So the actual power output or wattage is low, much lower than the sport of weightlifting, or Olympic weightlifting as it's called. And that's where you compete in the snatch and the clean and jerk. Now, some people are going to want to argue with me with this, so that's perfectly fine. So I'll refer you to a study done by John Garhammer in 1993, and in it he compared the power output, on the Olympic lifts versus the power lifts. So in it he compared a 125 kilo athlete who clean and jerked 260.5 kilos and produced 3,164 watts of power at the peak of the second pull. By comparison, a 100 kilo athlete deadlifted 375 kilos and produced 1,274 watts of power. That's about 3 times less than the 260.5 kilo clean. Now, why is that? Well, the time it takes to deadlift the 375 kilo deadlift is much longer than it takes to clean the 260.5 kilo clean. Does that make sense? So what does this have to do with your kettlebell training and your kettlebell lifting? Well, that's a great question. Powerlifters train to lift maximum weight through short or shortened ranges of motion. By contrast, Olympic lifters train to lift maximum weight through maximum ranges of motion, primarily over the head. They both, and by they, I mean both groups, use specialized techniques to accomplish these outcomes. All right. So in powerlifting, for example, a wide sumo stance for the deadlift and a exceptionally wide squat, depending on the division, right, that you're training or competing in, and an arched lower back and a wide grip for the bench press are examples of these specialized techniques. But here's the rub, to quote Shakespeare. All right. Bet you never thought we'd do Shakespeare here on this channel. You know, this is what happens when your mom's an English teacher, right? So the rub is, since kettlebell lifting is primarily ballistics or explosive movements, swings, right? There's our basic, and here's where it gets familiar, right? Or there's some similarity with the Olympic lifters: cleans, snatches, push press, and jerks. They're all displays or expressions of power. And in order to do them, you have to produce more power. They actually have more in common with Olympic weightlifting than powerlifting. And you might be wondering, well, why are you bringing this up, man? And what does this have to do with my kettlebell training? Again, two great questions, and I'm going to answer them right now. If you want to maximize your power output, you should use strategies of Olympic lifters, okay? You might be wondering, well, aren't I already doing that? And the answer is probably not. And that's because as I look across the social media landscape, what's a landscape? I don't know. Landscape. All right. As I look across the social media landscape and I do one-on-one coaching, helping individuals refine their kettlebell techniques, I see exactly the opposite. All right. Which brings me to today's technique tip. And that is the three H's, or remember the three H's. The first one is head. When setting up for your ballistics, make sure that your head is up and not looking down at the floor. Or looking down at the floor in front of your kettlebells. Okay. Why are you bringing this up? Well, I'm bringing this up because most people, from what I can tell, and most people that I'm interacting with correcting their technique, keep their heads down. They're looking probably 4 feet in front of the kettlebell, which is placed on the floor. Now, why is this a problem? Well, because your head follows your eyes and your body follows your head. All right. So if your eyes are down, then your head is down. And then your body, okay, is going to flex naturally. By contrast, when your head is up, it initiates what's called the extensor reflex, which naturally contracts your posterior chain, the muscles running down the backside of your body, right? Which is what you're going to use to lift the kettlebell into place. All right. Whether it's a swing, right, and you're finishing out in front of you, whether it's a clean and you're finishing it in the rack, or whether it's a snatch and you're fixing it overhead, right? You are using primarily the muscles of your posterior chain, not the muscles of your anterior chain. Again, those muscles are contracted when you look down at the floor like this. Okay. Number 2, the second H, those are your hips. Okay. This is going to be a real quick one here. When setting up your ballistics, your hips should be high enough to feel the muscles of your posterior chain contract. Okay. Now, this is going to depend on how you are built. right? If you've got short legs and a long torso, your hips are going to be lower than somebody who's got a short torso and long legs. All right. So the key here is make sure you can feel the posterior chain muscles contract before you hike your kettlebells. All right. Number 3, and our last H, are your hands. Your hand position in relation to your body on the setup of your kettlebell ballistics determines whether or not you'll need to employ specialized strategies to tame the arc so the kettlebells don't smack your forearms and your shoulders. All right. Or whether it comes into the arc. By it, I mean the kettlebell, right? Or your kettlebells, whether they end up in the rack position almost effortlessly. I don't know about you, but I'd rather have my kettlebells end up in the rack practically effortlessly without a whole lot of thinking. And so the strategy or the setup that you use when you're setting up your kettlebells, right, where you place your hands and the position you put your kettlebells in is going to determine whether or not that happens or whether or not you're wasting energy trying to tame the arc. And that's energy that could be directed into actually getting more reps and doing more work. All right. So if you do more work, obviously you can see faster results. All right. There are 4 different kettlebell setup positions, which create 4 different hand positions relative to your body. 2 of them make you come up with strategies that have unnecessary movements in them in order to tame the arc, and 2 don't. One of them is my personal favorite because the kettlebells practically roll up the front of your body and gently land in the rack. All right, especially if you get your hand, especially if you get your head and your hip positions correct. All right. I cover all 4 of those positions and go into further detail on the 3 H's and much more inside my double kettlebell lifting course called Kettlebell Strong. I'll leave a link for it in the description below if you'd like to check it out. And hopefully you found this video on the 3 H's helpful. If you did, go ahead and click the like button, smash the subscribe button, leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about the head position, all right, hip position, and hand positions. All right. Until next time, my friend, stay strong.